Every professional has a unique magic waiting to be discovered. At Finding the Unicorn in You helps you unlock your hidden potential. Thank you for tuning in. Now switching it over to our host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Finding the Unicorn in You. Today, I have a special guest who is not only a business owner, but also an author. He published the Wealth Elevator book, and he'll tell you a little bit more about this, but he's done a lot in his background to be able to succeed in life and is a unicorn himself. So without further ado, welcome Lane Kawaoka.
Hey, thanks for having me. Aloha, everybody.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get here?
Yeah, today we buy real estate deals, apartments, and we also invest as private equity into micro businesses. But it didn't always start off like that. I went to school to be an engineer because I heard that's how you get paid a lot without going to grad school or being a doctor. And just started to work for the man. Didn't really enjoy it right off the bat, but always was taught to be pretty frugal with my money, invest in the 401k, buy a house to live in. And, that was kind of what I blindly followed. And, kind of by luck, I just started to rent out my house. And did that pretty quickly because I was, good saver with my money. But, and that was 2009. And then 2015, I had 11 rental properties. And then, obviously did the larger deals from there. But a lot of this was just passively on the side of the day job as I was just getting by day.
So was that something that you've always wanted to do and you wanted to kind of like get into, or like what kind of led you to want to do real estate in that sense?
I think you hear a lot of wealthy people have real estate, specifically for the tax benefits. But, if you turn it into rental real estate, now it creates cash flow. And, like I said, I followed this dogma of buying a house to live in, which I don't necessarily think it's the best for a lot of people out there, especially good savers. Those people should go and buy little rental properties or invest it and make money, because when your money is in your own house, you're barely getting any return on investment. But like I said, I kind of haphazardly fell into this. I started to rent out my house because, as a young engineer, I was out traveling all over for work and never home. So I thought it was silly to have this big house to myself in my 20s. So I just started to rent it out. And in the beginning, it was just, a lot of cool beer money, a few $100, $500 on the side every month. But then I was like, wait a minute, if I just kept doing this a few more times, I'll be able to escape the rat race and quit. And then I realized, wow, I'm making like 20, 30% returns on my money. And, I'm not house flipping. I'm not doing any of these crazy risky things and just buy and hold. And I was like, well, why are we putting our money in that 401k nonsense? Right. And then I started to realize, the world of more sophisticated investors or credit investors, and they're out there. You just don't know who they are, right? They kind of keep them to themselves. Obviously, want to remain private, in terms of, they don't want to get sued by, people who know that they have money. But there's very quietly a lot of people utilizing the tax code in their favor and slowly acquiring, real estate portfolios, as I did, in my 20s into my early 30s.
That's amazing. And did you have like a mentor or someone to kind of guide you through the process, or was this all self-taught?
For the first like 6-7 years, all self-taught. It was just, I'm an engineer, so I can do numbers, and I found some calculators on the internet. And now if people want to go to my website, download it for free. It's all there. And rental real estate's not rocket science. One of the first things we kind of teach people is look for something that can hit a rent to value ratio of 1% or higher. So you find that by just simply taking the monthly rents divided by the purchase price, and 1% or higher is what you're looking for. Trouble is, where I lived in Seattle and now I live in Hawaii or California, you're not going to find it, and you probably you shouldn't invest in your own backyard. In California, you'd be lucky to find a place in the ghetto for under $400,000, and that'll rent for what, $2,000 a month? That's 0.5%, right? 2,000 divided by $400,000.
Yeah.
And what I realize is a lot of places out there in the other parts of the country, the majority of America, right? We're the crazy ones that live in California, Hawaii, Seattle, right? The numbers just don't make sense out there for cash flow.
Yeah, no.
And this is kind of where, started to, I got into it, but then I kind of pivoted from there.
Got it. And I feel like the average Joe won't even try something like that. Like they would consider that too risky. They would go, like you said, to the 401k plan because they want something safe, something secure. And this is something that could go really wrong or could go really right, like it did for you. So what do you think drove you to want to do that?
I mean, I think part of it is like when your why is big enough, you tend to do things off the beaten path. For me, I think at the time I didn't really enjoy my engineering job and I couldn't see myself doing it for 30, 40 years. I think a lot of people, they work with, either numbers, people, or, things. Engineers, I think a lot of people get enrichment when they work directly with people, right? Like I think doctors, they get a lot of, they see the healing of the pain in front of them. Whereas engineers, they just stare at numbers and there's not that success feedback coming back. So I don't know if looking back, if that was my thing. I just frankly didn't like it, man. It sucked. Especially when I was coming out of school. I mean, I do consider myself more of a older millennial. A lot of those baby boomers are still around. And it was just, trying to like be mentored and learn from that. Man, it was going to be a long, long haul. And, there's a lot of people out there that are kind of into the financial independence movement, being very frugal. That was never really my thing, right? Like who wants to live, not have a $5 latte, or I guess $6
Yeah.
today. But this path kind of opened up a world of other accredited investors, utilizing debt the right way. And it made a lot of sense to me at the time.
It's a smart choice. And you started young and now you're being able to reap all the benefits of everything that you sowed earlier on. And a lot of that can cause a lot of stress. So before we go into, because I do want to dive a little bit into your book, like
Yeah, yeah.
what did you do back then, or what do you do now to kind of maintain that work-life balance?
I think back then I had hope. That was really what I clung on to, when you're working long hours and especially when I was worked from the road a lot, right? So it was rarely home. I knew it wasn't sustainable. Luckily, I didn't have a family back then. I was younger and early in my career, but just seeing like, every time I would buy, save up 20, 30 grand, I'd buy another rental property. And that rental property after expenses, taxes, insurance, it would make me an extra couple $100, $300 every single month. And then, I'm no dummy, right? I can put this in a spreadsheet and extrapolate this out. Hey, next year I'll buy another. And then next year I'll buy another. Kind of came to a point where in 2015, I had 11 of these rental properties and had maybe like $3,000 of passive cash flow after all expenses every single month. And, that obviously did not replace my engineering salary, but it was kind of like having a third paycheck because we don't pay taxes on that because real estate has great tax benefits using the depreciation of the asset to offset taxes. But, you just build from there and it is truly like a hockey stick. You have to kind of delay gratification a bit, but it certainly is ROI much higher than what you're going to get out in the traditional investment market, which that was kind of where I started to meet other people. And, you kind of asked about mentors. I never had a specific mentor, but, as my net worth got to be a certain amount, started to interact with other accredited investors, people with $1 million net worth or greater. When I was growing up, my parents didn't have rental properties. I didn't have a rich uncle. So this was all new to me. But what I realized, all these tactics that the so-called wealthy do, if you call wealthy between $1 to $10 million, or, the average Joes with decent amount of money that built their own wealth, it's a very repeatable process. And that's kind of what I put in the Wealth Elevator book. And I split it up in terms of, different floors of the building, because there's a lot of books written out there for people who need help budgeting, or they need to make more income. Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, a lot of personal finance blogs. That's the audience. There was not really a book ever written for, where I started out of college, decent education, decent salary. I wasn't yet over $250,000 net worth, but to just plug away buying rental properties. I think the core curriculum that we teach people today is like, what do you do when your net worth is $1 million or greater, or you make a really good salary over $200,000, $300,000? right? That's where you invest in these larger deals that are direct to the source, as opposed to the traditional investments out there where there's all these middlemen and REITs and things like that. Sophisticated investors want to invest directly with the sponsor or the asset. But these are all the things that, we put in the book, and, you've got different paradigms of the wealth building journey, just like an entrepreneur, right? Like, you're under $100,000 of revenue, then you're the next stage. And then now you're starting to hire people, you're over $1 million revenue. There's the advice really is predicated on where you are at in the journey.
That makes sense. And I do want to go into your book, because you told about the different like stages in that, like in the ladder. So what kind of led you to want to publish a book and then share your knowledge into the world?
I think that there's a lot of books out there, right? Written for the masses. And there was really no book written for people who had $1 million net worth. And people were kind of stuck in this world of paying down debt, never getting mortgages. And that's just not what I realized that the wealthy people do. The wealthy people utilize good mortgages and debt. And, they're able to take on more risk to get way more reward. And this is kind of what I saw, kind of a niche, right? This paradigm of like, hey, it is not like one size fits all, guys. It changes. The ideas kind of change. And I'm kind of see it as like, my job is to kind of bring back the secrets of the wealthy, right? Like, what do people do when their net worth goes over 10 to 50 million? Some people that will buy their apartments from, gives me insight into the way that their brains work. And then when you get to the family office type of level, the $100-200 million net worth and level, and at that point, it's more of a legacy. But there are certainly things that regular people can emulate from that. But, it's just, there's just sort of segregated in terms of, the information being disseminated. But what I realized, the wealthy people between $1 to $10 million net worth and even greater are doing is nothing that the average guy cannot implement. But the things that, specifically my parents taught me are the complete opposite that are going to keep us stuck where we're at.
No, that makes sense. And coming from a family of like first generation immigrants, the relationship with money is not always the best. And I think you have to definitely rewire the way you look at money and investments and how to be able to live your life.
I certainly think like 90% of our investors are, maybe at 95%, are first generation multimillionaires. A lot of times first, immigrants, parents immigrated to America, may or may not have had a college education. Typically, I mean, I haven't written this book. This is more like your book, sounds like, in terms of career, but typically the pedigree is our parents or our grandparents are the ones who disseminate a lot of hard work ethic. Sometimes it's comboed with, fending for yourself. And as you become higher net worth, you need to start to work with other people's and collaborate. And the hard work ethic isn't necessarily as high on the list of priorities, right? It's more about doing things smarter. When my first working, I was a construction engineer, and a lot of my staff were blue collar folks, right? People that are stuck in it, economically immobile. And I remember the foreman always saying, my parents taught me to work hard, and that's what I'm going to do. Looking back on it, that was very bad advice. In fact, that's going to keep him where it's at. It certainly can get a guy to, make couple $100,000 a year with that attitude. But if you don't adopt the mindset of investing it and collaborating with other people, that's specifically what business partnerships are, right? Or, alliances in the business world, you can't take it to, $500,000 million revenue or greater. Just can't do it.
Yeah, you definitely have to change the way that you think, and the people that you hang around with, the people that you choose to invest time with, make a big difference, because you learn from them, they learn from you, and they support you because they understand the struggles that you're going through. So the people you choose is very, very important.
Yeah. And then we were saying earlier, we just got finished with our annual in-person retreat here in Hawaii. everyone's an accredited investor for the most part, $1 million or greater. But, as far as worth ethic, where they came from, how they built that initial wealth, a lot of it is just good, hard savings and values. But, when you're passing down, a lot of these guys will pass down $2, $3, $4 million to their kids. That was I think a big takeaway or emphasis amongst the crowd, right? Like you built this legacy, and how do you pass those things down? I guess, good problems to have, but that's kind of why we create the community for our folks, so that they can get around those people and have those conversations. If not, you just keep those things to yourself, so that, your friends don't think you're some kind of nose in the air kind of person, right?
Yeah, definitely. So who would be like who would be a good person if they're listening to right now that would be, wow, I really need to get this book because of X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I would say if you're interested in personal finances or investing, I think it's a good place to start, no matter where you're at, whether you make under $100,000 a year, $400,000 a year. Like I said, most of our core audience are accredited investors. So people who make over $200,000 a year or already have a net worth of $1 million or greater. But I do see the value. I mean, I wish I had a book like this when I was first starting, right? Like to know that there's different perches or switchback points coming up in the journey. Because you look at like what you see of wealthy people on TV, and you don't realize that you have to, go buy rentals first, then do bigger deals. And I think that's what's difficult, is a lot of people, they get stuck in, hanging out with entrepreneurs, or what we call entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
that don't really go anywhere. At least this is, unfortunately, most people, they just have visibility into the celebrities, the extremely wealthy people,
Yeah.
but they don't really see the people who are 2.5 million, 5 million, $12 million net worth. And
Hmm.
certainly they don't know the steps to get there. And that was kind of why I wrote the book. I mean, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, great book, great mindset. I love it, but it doesn't really tell you what the heck to do, right? A lot of motivation, but very, very little actionable advice. Where in my book, we say, hey, if you're in this band, buy little rental properties till your net worth is this much, or your passive cash flow is this much. Step up to bigger deals. To do that, you need to find other people, other credit investors doing this. That's the community that we provide for people. And then, in other parts, like, what are you doing for your banking? What are you doing for your insurance? What are you doing for, your legal entity structure, right? Because after you become $1 million or greater, you're certainly more of a candidate to get sued.
Yeah.
Where when you're under $250,000, when I had a handful of rental properties and my net worth was under $250,000, sure, yeah, you should maybe have a LLC and getting legal advice. But really, who's going to sue you for that? You're broke. You're not
Yeah.
really a target, when you're at that level of net worth at that
Yeah.
point.
No, and it makes sense to be able to have some like a guideline or something to be able to get there. And what you say makes a lot of kind of brings me clarity even too, because when you're hanging out with people who aren't, they're seeming to be really big, but they don't know how to get there, you can make a lot of bad choices. And sometimes, like you said, the choices that you make will keep you where you're at based on the knowledge you have. And sometimes people fear to do these things just because they're ignorant on the topic. So having a book like yours is super important because it can give the building blocks to get people through, at least no matter where they're at and to where they want to be.
Yeah, and finances is such an intimate thing. Like people who have more than half a million dollars, they tend to keep it to themselves, because if you don't have any, who's the book for? People who are interested in finances. People who are not interested in finances typically just kind of go on autopilot mode and spend just as much money, if not more, than what they make. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like the people that are in our community, they save at least 20, 30, $50,000 per year. So they might make $200,000, and, with taxes and all their living expenses, they may spend 150,000 of it. But they have that extra there to go and invest in rental properties or bigger syndications, or invest in private equity, things off Wall Street, of course. But this is kind of what allows them to get moving. Because if you don't got money, you're stuck. I can't help you. That's
Mhm.
where the advice comes from. Like, don't buy a latte or don't buy stuff you can't afford.
This has been a good conversation so far, and I have like a few more questions, but we need to start wrapping it up. So I'm gonna go to the last question, which is the premise of the podcast, the unicorn question. So, what has been the unicorn lesson that has impacted you the most to be able to be the person that you are today?
I think I just kind of followed my journey and, just I was very interested in finances, bought a lot of rental properties. It's kind of led me more down an entrepreneur path. I certainly think that it's accelerated my career path a lot further. I think there's a way of investing where you don't really need to spend too much time on it. And especially if you have a professional job, you should focus on that a lot. And that's what I did. My first 5, 6, 7 years, I was working my full-time engineering job. And that's what gave me the money to invest, the down payments and properties. And, I think that gave me a lot of insight into like managing and running the company today, working for Fortune 50 companies and then, the government. You certainly learn what doesn't work in there and, that type of stuff. But yeah, I think that's kind of my specific experience that I bring with me.
Was there ever like a piece of advice that someone gave you or something that stuck that helped you to kind of go that path?
I just saw, I think one thing that somebody said one day, like my boss told me, like, you don't know, I was kind of newer at the job and you're a project manager, you got to manage your budget, right? He's like, oh, you don't know. And that pissed me off because I was like, man, I got these like 5 rental properties. This is even very early on. I was like,
Mhm.
I'm probably making more money from a personal finance standpoint than you are, with your 2 kids. You make $300,000 a year, but I'm sure you blow 350 of it every year. And it kind of, yeah, I say that because, people focus a lot on career. I know you're kind of big into that, and I get it. That's how you make money. That's going to be how you even get money to invest. But I would say just don't lose sight of what the real business and focus should be. And, maybe it's a little selfish way of looking at it, but the business is personal finance. Personal is you. And everybody's in a little bit different situation, but, you know, you work for a company. The company is not you. The company is not you. You can get fired at some point. I know that was kind of my case, right? Like, I mean, I was working at my job, doing a good job. Eventually ran into, you know, difficult managers and, bosses. And, that happens. Everybody goes through that. And you start to realize that, this is not a family you work for. You are there to absorb, use this as a playing field to get skill sets. And you will be compensated based on your time with a salary. If you think that you're building a house for them, I mean, that's good on them. But, make sure you're building a house and a future for yourself.
That's why I decided to open up my own business. It was the same thing. Like there was people that sometimes hold you back and you're at the whim of whoever owns that business as an employee. And I challenge a lot of my clients is like, if you want to go into another career, then that's cool. We'll get you there. But if you really want to create, like take a step, make a risk on yourself, then let's see what business you can open. Let's see where you can kind of go into and what your passions lie. And it's difficult because not everybody's willing to make that leap into like investment, into opening up their own business, into trying different things because we're so conditioned to do things in a certain level, like from a young age. You get a good education, you get a good job, you have a family, and then you just teach your children that and repeat the cycle.
Yeah. I mean, your company pays you money because you in turn make more money for them. Now, especially with the government, that doesn't always happen, right? Because there's waste and all that type of stuff, and even a lot of companies. But, if you think you can do it better on your own, go ahead and try it and see. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Most people fail and they probably should go hide in a big company somewhere. But I think if people are kind of, listening and read books, they're typically on the growth minded side and typically a little bit better than that curve.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being on here. If one of our listeners wants to reach out to you or either purchase your book, how can they do so?
Yeah, we have a free masterclass. They can go to thewealthelevator.com/master, get access to it there. And they can check out my book on Amazon, The Wealth Elevator. And if you're into podcasts, they can check out my weekly podcast, The Wealth Elevator, on iTunes, Google Play. And then, yeah, if you guys pick up the book, feel free to shoot us an email, team@thewealthelevator.com, and we can hook you up with the electronic version or the MP3 version too.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lane. And for listeners, as a quick reminder, if don't feel like you have to write all these things down, if you go on the show notes, you'll see all the links and everything that he provided right now, as well as if you go onto my website at rainbowcareercoaching.com, click that Unicorn Wall of Fame. Lane will be there with the blog with a summary of everything we talked about, along with all these links as well. Last reminder, episodes come out every Friday at 7 a.m. And any last words before we close up?
I think the last thing, kind of dovetailing what you were mentioning earlier, when I was working my last job, I don't know where I heard it from, but a good piece of advice was like, just use your job as kind of a test field in a way. Like I can remember, like, when I was briefing my crew, I would try some different technique, see what works, right? Kind of hone your own leadership skills or your own, whatever your craft is. But, when you work for somebody else, that's not your baby. Be at Librium to mess things up and try things that you might want to try, and on somebody else's dime.
That's true. That's the time to make risks and see what works and what doesn't work. That is great advice.
Yeah. Worst thing is they fire you, but at least it's not your money,
That's true. Very true. You could always find another job. Perfect. Well, thanks, Lane, for everything. And yeah, we'll close up now. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks.